Az UNESCO az Egyesült Nemzetek nevelésügyi, tudományos és kulturális szervezete. Az UNESCO és 6 nemzetközi partner, az Európai Bizottság, az XP, a NOB, a Nike, az UNDP és a WHO közös erőfeszítései mentén dolgozták ki, és adták ki 2016-ban a minőségi testnevelési irányelveket döntéshozók számára. Ezek tartalmazzák a szakpolitikai irányelvek felülvizsgálatának módszertanát, kulcslépéseket az irányelvek felülvizsgálatának folyamatában, és egy interaktív képzési modult a nemzeti irányelveket felülvizsgáló csoportok számára. Az UNESCO nemzetközi titkárságának és területi irodáinak támogatásával 4 országban vezették be pilot jelleggel az iránymutatásokat, a Fidzsi-szigeteken, Mexikóban, Dél-Afrikában és Zambiában. Nagy tisztelettel köszöntöm Alexander Schischlick urat, aki az UNESCO ifjúsági és sporttagozatának vezetője. Előadásának címe az UNESCO minőségi testnevelési irányelveinek kísérleti bevezetése a Fidzsi-szigeteken, Mexikóban, Dél-Afrikában és Zambiában. Tanulságok és tapasztalatok. Schischlick úr, öné a szó.
So I have my presentation on the screen and I would like to thank you, Eva, for so magnificently guiding us through the conference. It's quite tough. And I salute everybody who is online today because I know it's not so easy. We all go to webinars all the time. Thank you, the Hungarian School Sports Federation and the European Council for Physical Education and Sports Research for the invitation extended to us, UNESCO, to share with you the experiences as they have just been announced. As you know, UNESCO is the United Nations lead agency in physical education and sport, and we promote the universal values of access to physical education, physical activity and sport, and also safe sport, and the right to physical education, physical activity and sport is even enshrined in the seminal instrument called the International Charter for Physical Education, Physical Activity and Sport that UNESCO adopted in the 70s and has revised in 2015. And under UNESCO's leadership was approved the so-called Kazan Action Plan that some of you might have heard. It was at the latest Sport Ministers Conference called MINEPS in 2017 in Kazan. And this Kazan Action Plan is in fact the overarching umbrella under which we do work now in order to develop consistent and coordinated policies to lever sport as a driver of the Sustainable Development Goals of the UN Agenda 2030. And these SDGs are, of course, not only relevant to development countries, but to all societies around the globe. And because all the challenges in education, health, gender equality, climate change, the management of cities, to name just a few, concern all of us. And of course, in this context, the area of quality physical education plays a major role. And I will not go back to what has already been discussed this morning by my colleague Michael Armstrong from the Commonwealth and Fiona Bull from the World Health Organization. Also, Dario Novak has made a very, very important submission with this inquiry he made in pupils in a few countries, because it shows that, of course, physical activity and the importance of physical education within school curricula is going down worldwide. And that's why also some years ago we have developed the quality physical education guidelines that were done together with the consortium of a series of organizations. Some might be even now listening in, not least the International Council for Sports Science and Physical Education, ICSPE, but the United Nations Development Programme, World Health Organization, the European Commission contributed, and the International Olympic Committee. And we had a sponsor, the company Nike, that helped us develop these guidelines. And these guidelines include benchmarks for provision, good practice examples, and the checklist for policy options. And together with these guidelines, we developed a policy revision methodology that outlines the key steps to take in the policy revision process. It's very complex, you will see in a few minutes. and an interactive training module for national policy revision teams, because also that has to be understood. And as already has been announced, this has been piloted in Fiji, Zambia, South Africa, and Mexico. You will say, why is there no European country involved? Yes, UNESCO is a worldwide organization, and we, of course, try to take on board the most varied social and economic contexts. And we felt that Fiji, a small island development state in the middle of the Pacific, and Mexico are completely at the opposite of the screen. And then Zambia, South Africa, well-developed economies in Africa. So it was interesting to compare also the local conditions. And the objective was that we wanted to test a multi-stakeholder approach in varying national contexts and analyze the gaps that exist in aligning various authorities. And you will immediately agree with me that it's more than sport and education, it's also health and youth. Together with another body, the National Olympic Committee, a very important player in sport policies in especially developing countries, and to align them in designing coherent and consistent policies and concrete measures to improve sustainable sport provisions in school. Our focus was not specifically on the policy per se, but rather on the process needed to bring about change at national level. So I will now delve more on that and tell you how the context of quality physical education is a little bit set in the policy environment. Public policies are a means to directly influence the provision of physical education. However, for such provisions to be considered of quality, they must include in their design and implementation some essential elements. And at UNESCO, we identified 3 aspects in the conception and implementation of the fundamental physical education policy to ensure the provision of quality physical education at local level. It's first, the protection and safeguarding of children, 2, inclusion, and 3, physical literacy. And these aspects must in turn be considered in a national strategy with actions through 5 areas: teacher training, supply and development, facilities, equipment and resources, curricular flexibility, community partnerships, and monitoring and quality assurance. Finally, a quality physical education national strategy must be accompanied by a communication and advocacy strategy later on. So the methodology that I'm just showing you here is the following. Each policy revision process was supported by a national team of stakeholders led by a designated ministry focal point and a national coordinator. Technical backstopping was provided in each country by a national partner from the UN. It might have been UNESCO, it might be UNICEF, it might be the World Health Organization, UNDP, and an international coordination group of expert institutions. The recruitment and training of each national team was supported directly by UNESCO in the delivery of inception briefings, interactive workshops, and provision of tailored guidance ranging from input on participatory process design to national communications. National coordinators and ministry focal points also benefited from an international training workshop that we hosted in Paris with the help from the Deutsche Gesellschaft für internationale Zusammenarbeit, the famous GIZ. Following a participatory policy revision process, engaging elite and grassroots stakeholders from education, health, and sport, the revised national policies were then peer-reviewed by another team of experts coming from Canada, Iran, Japan, Venezuela, and Scotland. So you see the panoply and the variety of views that you can bring up when you work on a global level. And the project implementation featured an integrated monitoring and evaluation component anchored by a national expert and international analyst to review, process, and revise policy content against the theory of change model. And what we achieved then, I would like to explain you this shortly. First of all, one country we failed, not all, but in the process we failed. It was South Africa, because internal political constraints precipitated significant delays and prevented the national coordinator from delivering the contracted work. However, South Africa progressed. We have very good analysis documents, but we have not a new policy in place. In the same time, we also tried to implement this project in parallel in Tunisia, but again, and there we tried to build it upon the National Olympic Committee, but we had again a problem with this ministerial reorganization. So we couldn't go on, so we stopped it. On the other hand, without having planned it, in Kenya, we have what we call the National Commission of UNESCO. In all member states, we have that. The National Commission of UNESCO, which has a very strong education and sport agenda, they picked up the guidelines and they spearheaded a multi-stakeholder consultation process according to our methodology, and the national policy review is currently underway. So that wasn't really planned by us, but it can work in the same way. And the same way, for instance, in Palestine, there is currently going on a project supported by the French International Development Corporation, whereby the same guidelines are picked up and tried to be adapted to Palestine, and we are not contributing to that. Let me now report back on you what happened in the three countries, Fiji, Mexico, and Zambia. Fiji developed the country's first ever physical education policy framework, characterized by meaningful civil society participation, including the engagement of almost 1,400 students, 337 teachers, and 992 parents across 190 schools in 9 education districts. This is enormous. Mexico developed an interministerial physical education policy strategy with systematic engagement of diverse stakeholder groups, including the Ministry of Health, the Secretary of Public Education, CONADE, which is the Mexican sport organization, our UNESCO office, and the regional health organization and the World Health Organization, and representatives of more than 30 civil society organizations, universities, academic experts. And Zambia developed an action-oriented implementation framework for the national physical education policy. Close interministerial engagement throughout can be regarded as a good practice example, as can the systemic engagement of national media as a means of creating positive public interest. An analysis of the draft policy instruments shows that each one integrated significant and substantive policy revision, which were in line with the 8 thematic areas of the policy guidelines and in accordance with 9 desired outcomes of the project's theory of change modeling. The independent project evaluators, the Institute of Sport and Development in South Africa, considered that the guidelines were integrated into the policy instrument to a high extent. To 76% in Fiji, 72% in Zambia, and 68% in Mexico. The policy revisions evident in each draft instrument can be considered significant and stand to impact what we would call the implementation and delivery of physical education in each national context. There were several success factors that I like to share with you also in this slide. Tailored country implementation, which resulted in a diverse range of policy instruments which will support additional country pickup in all world regions. Then the inclusive and participatory policy design process, which engaged diverse stakeholders from education, youth, sport, and health sectors, anchoring national ownership and strengthening intersectoral interfaces. Concrete provisions on the value of community partnerships, creative communications, and results-based monitoring and evaluation mechanisms integrated in each policy instrument. The consistent involvement of the national Olympic committees, together also with young Olympic ambassadors. And building all these lessons learned, we are now finalizing 3 publications. One is a final evaluation report. And then what is even more remarkable, a policy brief focused on key research findings and related policy implications, complemented by good practice examples to build the case for quality physical education and its broader educational and social implications with respect to youth development and global citizenship. Target users include policymakers, policy advocacy groups, teachers, and also youth leaders. If they all come together, probably we'll have success. And the policy advocacy toolkit will also be produced that is aimed at practically orienting individuals and groups across education, youth, and health sectors with such policy development, its processes, and opportunities for engagement. The key focus will be placed on the value of coalition building in policy advocacy and the development of intersectoral advocacy status. The evaluators that I just mentioned state that the guidelines constitute one of the most remarkable and significant global initiatives in physical education of the last century, and recommended that the project be promoted as a case study for use by other UN agencies and multilateral donors working on policy development. And this brings me now to the wider need of a strong partnership between sport and education. The guidelines are referenced in the Global Action Plan of Physical Activity that Fiona Bull this morning mentioned. And while the World Health Organization runs regular school health assessments, it cannot influence the curricula, and especially the physical education curricula. We therefore have to dive into the education system, and UNESCO has a strategy on education for health and well-being, which is run by our education sector, and that includes areas such as nutrition, sexuality education, and bullying, and that reflects growing international recognition of the interrelationship between education and health, and which necessitates, of course, very strong action. And such a sport and education partnership should be launched as a dynamic, data-driven, multi-stakeholder initiative that endeavors to unite public and private stakeholders behind an integrated vision of developments which harness the combined power of sport, education, health, and youth ecosystems. And we want to focus on physical, mental, and social well-being. Dario Novak has presented this very convincingly this morning. It's the physical, mental, and social well-being that we want to promote through such approach. And we want this integrated approach to have impact-oriented projects that would have a transformative behavioral and systems-based change. So it cannot be only by advocating, we have to go along that. We see, in fact, 3 areas of action. We need strengthening capacity from politics to practice. We have to support evidence-based advocacy, and we have to develop research and knowledge. Maybe you haven't followed very well the idea of the Kazan Action Plan, but you have seen that the various sustainable development goals presented this morning by the Commonwealth. All these falls together in measuring the impact of sport and physical education of the SDGs. It also is fully in keeping with the UN Action Plan on Sport for Development and Peace, and of course, with the Global Action Plan by the World Health Organization. Let me finalize now with a short iteration through the next, now already launched Quality Physicality Education Survey. This is just being distributed to ministries and teachers at the same time. It is supposed to enhance quality physical education coherence between countries and regions, create data sets. These are created by gender, disability, age, country, region, and thematic area, and promote data-driven investment in quality physical education. This survey is quite unique at an international level and provides an unparalleled opportunity to collect comparable national level data sets for aggregate analysis. It has been designed to address the absence of results-based monitoring evaluation and policy practice related information, including basic data on physical education, policy and practice. Findings will be translated into a series of action-oriented products which will support UNESCO member states to measure, evaluate and enhance the development of quality physical education policy and its delivery. And as I told you, the data is being collected by government representatives that are responsible for physical education and also school-based educators. And UNESCO is responsible for distributing the ministerial level survey, and the International Federation of Physical Education, FIEP, is distributing the school level survey. We are the national delegate network present in 143 countries. Well, I would like to thank all of you individually who have been involved in this, who are being involved in this exercise, for all the support. There will be 7 areas covered in the survey: physical education level participation, inclusion, teacher education, supply and development, facilities, equipment and resources, curriculum quality, and monitoring and assurance of quality. There will be a steering committee, and last but not least, we will be able, hopefully, to present the results in early 2021. I thank very much the FIEP for being such a valuable partner in that, and each and everybody around the table for being able to contribute to this work. Thank you very much. Over to you, Eva.
Thank you very much, Mr. Schischlick. We have one question for you from the audience. Eva would like to know, where and when will the publications be available?
So the publication of the 3 publications that we were just mentioning that come out of the quality physical education pilot are now being finalized. They should be ready by end of January. So we'll find them on our website. It is also being revamped now, thanks to this very good work we have carried out. And the guidelines, you can find them also on UNESCO's website. It's on my slide now. There you can find the guidelines, the methodology, and infographics and everything that goes with it. Thank you.
Thank you too very, very much. It was really great seeing your presentation. Thank you for the answer, and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, and have a good conference.
Készült Magyarország kormánya megbízásából az Európai Unió támogatásával.